Thank you for listening to the show on Really Big Something Channel. October 27th, 2017.
From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time.
2:06 here on the great WRKO. Okay, my friends, so finally, the last batch of documents regarding the Kennedy assassination have been released to the public, with the exception of 188 pages, as I've mentioned, whereby the CIA and FBI, to me this is incredible, openly defy President Trump and say, no, we're going to redact those pages. So that, again, tells you just how accountable the CIA and FBI are. I mean, who are they to basically tell the president, sorry, but get lost? So it's obvious they're worried, and their worried stuff is going to come out. Now, I've given you my theory. I don't believe the lone killer. I've never believed it. It just stretches credulity. So the question is, in my view, who do you think was behind the Kennedy assassination? 617-266-6868. My theory, and I can cite you sources, Thomas Reeves, a brilliant scholar, Paul Johnson, really I think one of the greatest historians of the 20th century, Seymour Hersh, Dark Side of Camelot, very interesting stuff in that book, Peter Collier, David Horowitz, Nikita Khrushchev, in his memoir. By the way, he admired Eisenhower considerably, said Eisenhower was much more impressive than Kennedy when they met at these international summits. Nikita Khrushchev revealed a lot about Kennedy in his memoirs, and really just what a third-rate lightweight he really was, at least according to Khrushchev. Now, by the way, a very important piece of information, Khrushchev in his memoirs actually said that Castro wanted a world war, that he could not believe it, but when they had that showdown with Kennedy over the Cuban Missile Crisis and the naval blockade, Castro was in fact on the phone with Khrushchev saying, nuke America. And Khrushchev said, are you insane? They'll nuke us back. We're talking about 5, 6, 7, 800 million dead. And Castro literally told Khrushchev on the phone, according to Khrushchev, do it. For the good of the socialist revolution, do it. America will fall, and we can pick up the pieces from the ashes. Mao, the butcher of China, told Khrushchev, China is a population then of 1 billion people. Even if we lose 500 million, 600 million, Mao told Khrushchev, we can still have 400 million, but America will be no more. Do it. Launch a nuclear war. So, to me, I always thank God that it was a Ukrainian peasant, however evil he was, and a secularist, who was at the head of the Soviet Union. Because had it been real fanatics like Castro or Mao, it would have been World War III over the Cuban Missile Crisis. 617-266-6868. Bill, who wants to talk about a second shooter. Go ahead, Bill.
Hi, Jeff.
Hi.
Dr. Charles Crenshaw, attending physician of Jack Kennedy on November 22nd, witnessed a bullet hole entry in his trachea and his upper right temple. I think another doctor witnessed in the back of his head an exit wound the size of your fist, which means Oswald was behind him when all the shots rang out. So that means unless bullets can make a 180-degree turn, it was a second shooter.
Bill, look, I agree with you. I think I've never believed in the lone shooter theory myself, personally. You look at the angles of the bullets, witnesses that there was flash coming out. And Lee Harvey Oswald, I don't believe he could have pulled it off either by himself, or he may even have been a patsy. I mean, he was clearly mentally deranged. He wasn't, he was clearly a communist. There's no question about it. But he was mentally deranged. He wasn't all up there. That this guy could have scouted the area, planned for this from the 6th floor, with really not a very impressive rifle. Remember, this is 1963. And perfectly made those shots. I don't believe it. I just don't believe it. I don't believe it. So whether there was other shooters, or whether he was just a patsy, I think we'll never know. But I don't believe he was the lone killer. I just don't. 617-266-6868. Jerry on the Cape. Go ahead, Jerry. Comrade, how you are, my friend?
I am well. Comrade, I agree with you. The CIA is behind this, and I think what they were going to do, this is just my opinion from what I've read, a lot of the same things you've read. And you remember Paul Kangas?
Yes.
He wrote some excellent stuff on the JFK assassination also. I think they were going to blame, what the plan was to blame Cuba and Russia. And let me tell you why. The CIA started in 1959 recruiting anti-Castro Cubans in Miami. And it's interesting, too, Jeff. A lot of the people that were involved in the Bay of Pigs were also involved in Watergate and Iran-Contra. And Felix Rodriguez went to jail for that, the former head of the secret police for Castro. He was involved with the CIA. He took the hit for Watergate. Remember Felix Rodriguez?
Yes.
Jeff, there's one name that they don't want to get out. One name. And that's George H.W. Bush.
You read my mind.
His connection to this.
You read my mind.
Jeff, have a great weekend.
Thank you, my friend. Look, everyone's making fun of, Rafael Cruz and Ted Cruz's dad, although I gotta say, I swear, I said this to Jared, and Brittany when we were off the air. I said, the thing about Trump is that now, almost everything he says later, you think at the time it's like a crazy uncle. No, this can't be true. I mean, come on, it can't be. And then it turns out to be true. So I'm saying, even now on Rafael Cruz, after this guy's track record, I don't know if we want to poo-poo Rafael Cruz. I mean, it wouldn't shock me if in 15, 20 years, the CIA redacted, you see, there was Rafael, and there was Cruz, and that had to be kind of blacked out. No, I don't think Rafael Cruz had anything to do with with Lee Harvey Oswald or the Kennedy assassination. But honestly, with Trump, he may be right. I mean, really, at this point, you never know. But George H.W. Bush, he was in the CIA. He was high up in the CIA. He was always part of the military-industrial complex. There's no question about it. This guy has been part of the New World Order now for decades. I wouldn't put anything past him. Anything. Sally in Danvers. Go ahead, Sally.
Hi, Jeff. Good afternoon. Thanks for taking my call.
My pleasure.
As always, I have kind of a conspiratorial twist, and they always bear out to be true. I agree with your assertion relative to George Bush, the Zapata oil, which was a CIA front. It's how they were able to infiltrate back and forth into Cuba, because there was a CIA presence in Cuba during that time. And that indeed Cuba and that whole standoff was originally, I believe, a false flag to implicate Russia for the very reasons you talked about. But there's another piece of this that people, unless you're a historian, rarely do people know about this stuff, or at least they don't connect the dots. I'm going to take you back to the 1930s and 40s when Sigmund Wahlberg was the great financier coming out of Germany, those big profitable banks in Germany. And his son, Paul Wahlberg, who apart with Nelson Aldrich, I don't know if you remember him, he was the U.S. Treasurer during Kennedy's administration.
Yes.
Now, the cabinet was, Kennedy took Johnson on as a vice president as kind of a healing, similar to the way Reagan and Bush came together. It was kind of bringing those two factions of the Democrats together, similar to Reagan and Bush on the Republican side. The point that I'm making is that the only choice that John Kennedy had on his cabinet was his brother as Attorney General. and the rest of the people were Lyndon Baines Johnson people. Now, what's interesting about Paul Walberg and Nelson Aldrich is that these two had been working on trying to get the United States into the IMF and totally married through the Fed Reserve into a global monetary system. And this is all factual. So if people don't believe this, they can just pick up some reference materials. But what's interesting about this is Nelson Aldrich was the U.S. Treasurer Secretary, and Paul Walberg put together the Jekyll Island meeting, and that was very secret. And if you remember, John Kennedy caught on to some of this stuff, and he gave that famous secret society speech of how he didn't want to have secret societies. It was important that the U.S. be transparent, and it was all about pegging gold to that $35 value, 35 ounces, et cetera. And so 6 months after Kennedy made that speech, because Kennedy was going to pull out from the IMF,
yes,
and he wanted to disband the CIA because they were too rogue, too secret, too powerful.
Yes.
This is a fact.
Yes, you're completely right. No, Sally, look, thank you for that call. Look, in a nutshell, Kennedy, he was a lightweight. I'm just being honest with you, but it doesn't matter. You can be a lightweight and still be accurate or right on certain issues. I'm telling you, I'm just giving you the whole, the view from a historian's point of view, how the Russians perceived him and how others perceived him. So, like, for example, Profiles in Courage. No, that was ghostwritten. Look, he had a daddy, and his daddy wanted him to be president. But at his heart, remember this, Kennedy fought in World War II. He fought in World War II. He saw his colleagues die. At his heart, he was a nationalist. At his heart, he was he was a patriot. He was not a globalist. He wasn't. And so there were many aspects now of the global economic elites that he despised, because he often asked himself, well, where's your loyalty? To the United States or to the bottom line, to the world? And so he did not like the IMF. He was very distrustful of the CIA because he thought the CIA had essentially gone rogue, which it had. He was very distrustful of many institutions in government. Now, he could handle all of that. It's when he went mano a mano with Khrushchev, I'm just telling you, that he broke. He just broke. The pressure was too much. He also had health issues. And when they saw him break down, Johnson literally said, and you want this guy to be our president? Are you freaking kidding me? Somebody's got to take this guy out. And that's the argument that he used. Now, if you remember, just look at Johnson's presidency. Okay, it's a lot like Obama. Think about it. What did he not give the CIA? What did he not give the military-industrial complex? What did he not give the economic globalists? He gave them everything. Everything. The CIA budget exploded. The military budget exploded. They wanted a big war in Vietnam. He gave them the Gulf of Tonkin. Basically, it was fabricated, and then he took us all in. On the IMF, I could go down issue after issue. Even open borders. It began Ted Kennedy's bill, 1965, signed by Lyndon Johnson. So this world of open borders, economic globalization, the United States essentially now acting as an empire where we're intervening or meddling in countries all over the world, that really began to take off under Johnson. Yes, you could say a little bit under Eisenhower, yes, under Truman, yes, under FDR, but it was all within moderation. It was under Johnson that it was on steroids. And so the national security state, the military-industrial complex, from that moment on, the deep state, it essentially took over the American government. It's really under Johnson and the Great Society. And if you notice, everything, welfare spending exploded. The growth of big government, that's when they gave us Medicare, Medicaid. Really, modern-day liberalism was born under Johnson and the Great Society. So if you're Lyndon Baines Johnson, who was as corrupt as hell, and by the way, you can read Robert Caro's biography, it's not just Jeff Kuhner, was suspected of having murdered some people in Texas, because that's the kind of guy he was, and you're looking at a guy like Kennedy, and you're saying, hold on, if it's him, who's going to take over in 68? Me or Bobby? It'll be Bobby. And then in 76, it'll be Teddy. I'm just looking at it from Johnson's point of view. I'm never going to be president. I'm not going to let the Kennedys run the show. Take them down. And the Russians believe it. The KGB believe it. And honestly, that's what I believe. I think it was personally, I think it was LBJ and the CIA. 617-266-6868. Just my opinion. 225 here on the great WRKO. And you know, isn't it just awfully convenient? So 2 days after Lee Harvey Oswald allegedly, right, guns down Kennedy, he's 2 days later, he's shot by Jack Ruby. Shot dead. So the guy that could tell us everything just is conveniently knocked off. Isn't it incredible? Okay, in one of the memos, in one of the documents that's released, and I think it's very telling, J. Edgar Hoover is on the record telling people in the CIA and in the FBI, we have to have the American people believe that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. So even Edgar Hoover is sort of J. Edgar Hoover. Even Hoover is trying to tell people in the deep state, guys, we got to go full out PR press after Ruby kills Lee Harvey Oswald. Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. Sell it, push it, promote it. And then, of course, the Warren Commission was set up, and that was their conclusion. Awfully convenient. So the one guy that could spill the beans happens to be knocked off himself. Fran in Lowell. Go ahead, Fran.
Yes, I did want to say one thing. The woman that you had on that spoke about Zapata really knows what she's talking about.
Oh, yes. She's very smart. No question about it. Very well read.
Yes. I lived in Houston for many, many years, and I worked for an oil company. And I worked with, at one time, a man who was an assistant to Lyndon Johnson. And he had the documents to prove it and pictures of himself, etc. Johnson was a brilliant politician, a sleazy gangster of a person, and a womanizer, and to me, a low-type.
Yes.
Period.
Yes.
And Kennedy, I believe that maybe we could look back and say lightweight in the sense of comparing him to some maybe cleverer and better politicians. But he and Robert were, I think, despite their womanizing, like the light versus the dark. I still don't want to see everyone trying to bring them down, not because I put them on a pedestal, but because I think that their error in what they could have accomplished in the right circumstances would have been beneficial and long past their time beneficial. I think Lyndon Johnson was brilliant, and those who supported him, perhaps some of them had good motives. For the most part, he was a devious conniver. I believe that he was involved. I don't know if he directly would have planned it, but he certainly was involved, and perhaps the CIA along with him. I don't think there's anyone who's ever lived through the Kennedy assassination that thinks Oswald did it. I think that's a joke.
I agree with you. Fran, I agree, and thank you for that call. And when I say lightweight, remember, Kennedy who was he always compared to? Eisenhower. Remember, right? Eisenhower, the man who, led us on D-Day, Normandy, the Allied forces, was president from 52 to 60. He's the one that Khrushchev constantly met with, right? So Eisenhower, a military man, a well-read man, a very profound, substantial man. So Kennedy was always being compared to Eisenhower. And it's in that context that people considered him a lightweight because, Eisenhower was really, frankly, one of the greatest generals we had. But so that was, when I mean lightweight, it was in comparison to Ike. Aaron in New Hampshire. Go ahead, Aaron.
Jeff.
Aaron, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Jeff.
We have Glenn? Okay, Glenn. Go ahead, Glenn.
Jeff, to make a parallel, if what you said is true about Kennedy, I fear for Trump. For opposite reasons. Kennedy was a follower. Trump is a leader. Think about it. Our president is a temporary employee, is he not? If he's not towing the company line with the military complex, the Republicans, the Democratic establishment, they want him removed. Just like Kennedy, Trump was not supposed to win.
Well, Glenn, look, and thank you for that call. Look, Glenn, I mean, that's what they're doing. What you're seeing now, this is the great story of our time. It's a silent, slow-motion coup. And they're trying to fabricate evidence that he colluded with Putin. They're spying on him. You got the FBI director that went against him, Comey, then he had to be fired. The whole media is against him. The Republicans are against him. The Democrats are against him. Now, if they can't remove him through, let's say, propaganda, that's what this is now, propaganda, through peaceful means, I mean, I don't wish, please, I don't want this to be misinterpreted, but let's put it this way. I've told them this many times. You better trust your security. Everybody who's involved in your security, you better trust them. Okay, coming up next, the opiate crisis, and Trump finally responds. Let's take it to Evan Heidenrich. He's going to talk about that as well. Take it away, Evan. My friends, it's one of the greatest crises of our time, and the Republican and Democratic establishment have done absolutely nothing. And finally, President Trump moves. Where others didn't and refused to lead, he has now led. So yesterday, at a major press conference, Trump finally declared the opiate crisis a national public health emergency. And I want you to listen now to the president describe in detail the depth of this crisis and how many lives it has claimed. Roll cut one, Brittany.
Last year, we lost at least 64,000 Americans to overdoses. That's 175 lost American lives per day. That's 7 lost lives per hour in our country. Drug overdoses are now the leading cause of unintentional death in the United States by far. More people are dying from drug overdoses today than from gun homicides and motor vehicles combined. Think of it. Motor vehicle crashes, gun homicides, more people by far from drug overdoses.
That's incredible. I mean, the numbers are staggering. 175 a day, 7 an hour, over 60,000 a year. A year. And he's right. That's more than all the, Chicago and all these places where people are shooting each other. That's more than all the deaths caused by guns, cars, vehicles, car crashes combined. In fact, just to show you how big this problem is, in Vietnam, we lost 58,000 boys. In Vietnam, the whole war, the whole war. Let's say from 1963 to 1975. The whole war, we lost 58,000. We lose more than that every year now, due to heroin, fentanyl, opiates, prescription drugs, you name it. That's how severe and deadly this crisis is. In Iraq, 4,000 dead. 4,000. About 35,000 wounded, many of them maimed and crippled. But I mean, this makes the Iraq war pale in comparison. This even makes Vietnam pale in comparison. And yet our politicians either refuse to do anything or deliberately turn a blind eye. Take your pick. Listen now to President Trump go on even more about the scale of this crisis. Roll it, Brittany.
These overdoses are driven by a massive increase in addiction to prescription painkillers, heroin, and other opioids. Last year, almost 1 million Americans used heroin, and more than 11 million abused prescription opioids. The United States is by far the largest consumer of these drugs, using more opioid pills per person than any other country by far in the world.
Brittany, do me a favor. Play me that last line again.
The United States is by far the largest consumer of these drugs, using more opioid pills per person than any other country by far in the world.
We're killing ourselves. We not only have, yes, there's a heroin epidemic and it's affecting Canada and it's affecting Western Europe and it's affecting China. Yes, 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 yes. But it's not even close. It's not even close. More people die of opiate overdoses in this country by far than any other country in the world. This is one of the biggest crises of our time. And if no one else has the guts to say it, let me say it. Because a lot of this has been coming in through our porous southern border. Now, not big pharma and the opiates, that's one thing. But you look at heroin, especially a lot of this cheap heroin, this garbage heroin, which is highly addictive and apparently extremely inexpensive. These are all the Mexican drug cartels. I mean, with all due respect, I saw VB's interview with Chuck U. Schumer, and it was great that he got him at the diner and nabbed him for an interview. Don't get me wrong. But I heard that liar go on, Chuck Schumer, go on about how, the Chinese are on fentanyl and all this stuff. They're turning a blind eye. Forget the Chinese. It's the Mexicans. I mean, yes, it's the problem from China too, but the real one is coming right through that southern border, baby. And so you look at today, all right, here, just objectively. I don't care whether you're liberal, conservative, Republican, Democrat, whatever your politics are, what skin color you are, what gender you are, what sexual orientation you are, whatever you are, okay? You walk downtown Salem, you can see the needles everywhere. In the parks, you can see the needles everywhere. In Lynn, you can see the needles everywhere. Here, closer to my neck of the woods, okay? North Attleboro. There's a drug epidemic. They're overdosing and dropping like flies in North Attleboro. It's getting to the point in some of those parks, I can't take my kids because you've got needles everywhere. So this is affecting community after Boston Common. Just walk down Boston Common now. It used to be nice. Not anymore. This is affecting community after community, city after city, not just in Massachusetts. It's rolling up into New Hampshire, into Maine, into Michigan, into Wisconsin, in Ohio. I don't want to repeat this story, but it bears repeating. My brother-in-law, God bless him, is now living in California with my sister, Jennifer, and my two wonderful nephews. He used to practice medicine. He was a GP in Ohio. I said, Marty, his name is Martin. I call him Marty. I said, hey, Marty, why'd you leave? I'm just curious. I mean, Ohio's nice. You guys are outside of Cleveland. He goes, Jeff, I'm not a drug pusher. I didn't sign up to be a doctor and study all those years and sacrifice to become essentially a drug dealer. Everybody that was coming into my office, they wanted either OxyContin or Oxycodone, some kind of an oxy. They were hooked on painkillers. They wanted a fix. And I don't want to become their drug pusher. He goes, it is killing people in the heartland. It is killing them. And yet, instead of saying something about it, instead of doing something concrete about it, number one, build that wall. Number two, secure the border. Number three, hammer the Mexican drug cartels. If need be, declare war. I'm serious. On the Mexican drug cartels and MS-13. And then go in Massachusetts, and unleash the drug units. Instead, they're disbanding them, these drug crime units, and go after these illegal gangs. Go after every single one of them. Go after them in Chelsea. Go after them in Lawrence. Go after them in Framingham. I don't care. Lynn, Salem, you hunt them down. Instead, nothing. No, we need more tolls on the road. I'm not kidding. We need more tolls. We got to spend more on welfare. No, we have to bring in 10,000 Syrian Muslim refugees into Boston, according to Macho Marty Walsh. That's the big problem. We don't have enough, I swear, we don't have enough Muslim refugees in Boston, Jeff. Come on now. That's the big problem now, Jeff. Come on now. You want to see how bad it's getting? Swear to God, you couldn't make this up. God is my witness, like I'm in the confessional. You couldn't make this up. So now, as you know, the local law enforcement are overwhelmed. They're overwhelmed with having to resuscitate people because they're going to sometimes it's the same person's house 2 or 3 times a week, overdosing from heroin or opiates or whatever, okay? So they're all carrying Narcan with them. Now it's getting to the point that we have such a population hooked on opiates that now they're going to sell them at Walgreens. I swear, the pharmacy, Walgreens, there's one near my house. In all 8,000 stores across America, they are now going to be selling the Narcan nasal spray everywhere. Not for a prescription. No. This is, in the aisle. Not over the counter. No. You just, look, so I'll tell you what, all right? Jimmy downstairs was shooting up with Jenny. I got a little bit of a scare yesterday when Jenny started yelling and screaming, and I went down and I saw Jimmy with his eyeballs in the back of his head and the foam coming out of his mouth. And I thought he was going to bite the dust on that one. So here's what we're going to do. Let's go to Walgreens because I got a bit of a headache. So let's get some Tylenol, all right, for the headache, and maybe get a quart of milk, and let's get some Narcan for little Jimmy. So the next time he and Jenny shoot up in the basement, just in case they start overdosing, I can just snort it up his nose and don't bother calling the police. They're now selling it in the aisle at Walgreens. Now you tell me, are we serious or are we not serious? Because you know what they're going to start doing now? They're just going to buy the freaking Narcan. And then say, okay, keep shooting up, and if you see me going down, if the white foam starts leaking out of my mouth, right, dribbling out of my mouth, just give it to me up my nose. And that's it. Then we'll go shoot up again tomorrow. This country has a public health emergency. This is a moral crisis. This is a spiritual crisis. This is a social crisis. This is a cultural crisis. And it's time that we now say enough is enough. It's time we go after the supply. It's time we give these poor people who are hooked on this the opportunity to go to rehab so they can clean themselves up. And it's time we go after Big Pharma, and I mean go after them hard, and say you're not going to turn doctors into essentially glorified drug pushers. In other words, it's time for a serious, real war on the opiate crisis. Instead, in Massachusetts and in places across New England, we're telling the illegals, come on down. We're telling MS-13, come on down. We're telling the drug dealers, come on down. And now we're going to start selling Narcan at your local Walgreens. So what the hell? Hey, Brittany, you know what? No, I'm serious. Help out the cops a little bit. You go to Walgreens tonight.
I don't want to be held responsible for that. I'm not going to go buy Narcan at Walgreens. Sorry.
You're so intolerant.
What if, the person dies and it's going to be my fault? I don't think so. I don't want nothing to do with it.
Well, when you go to Walgreens, what do you typically buy? Cough medicine?
Yeah. Sure.
Maybe a jug of milk.
I don't really go to Walgreens, but
yeah. I go to Walgreens because it's closer than CVS. Go get
an aspirin or something. I don't know.
Yeah, whatever. You go to the local pharmacy for a little something, a bag of chips, maybe some cough medicine, buy some Narcan. You see somebody overdosing on the street, be a good Samaritan, stick the spray up their nose, and what the hell? They can shoot up again tomorrow.
Kuhner, did you hear the story about the dog in Andover that overdosed and they had to bring the dog back with Narcan?
Is that the dog that ate fentanyl?
Yes.
Can you just tell that story very quickly?
A puppy overdosed.
Was it a pit bull?
It was a lab, Jeff.
It was a lab. Okay, yeah. Wow.
Why, you wouldn't have felt bad if it was a pit bull?
I'm just curious.
So the dog was found on the street in Andover, but he survived because he was given the Narcan. But what I want to say is, even like the canine dogs with the police officers, they're getting into the fentanyl and the heroin and they're overdosing as well. I mean, if it just gets on your hands, like fentanyl, I forget where exactly in Massachusetts it happened. I don't know if it was the North Shore or not, but you just overdose. You just touch it and you overdose. It's been happening to the dogs when they're searching cars and stuff, and it's happening to police officers often too. So police officers are having to get Narcan because the drug is like...
Okay, but hold on. Let's get back to little Spike here for a second. So
okay,
Spike...
I don't know if his name is Spike Kuhner.
Well, whatever. I'm just making that name up. So Spike... Now, why
Zoe.
was... Zoe. Really? Are you serious?
I swear, Zoe.
Okay, Zoe. So Zoe the puppy... Why was Zoe the puppy... Like, what was he doing? Licking fentanyl or the powder?
He picked up a cigarette package.
He picked up a cigarette package, and there was fentanyl in the cigarette package.
Yep, and it overdosed.
And then the poor doggy overdosed.
Yeah.
And then what happened? They injected the Zoe with Narcan.
Yeah.
Or they gave it in his nose? I guess he snorted it? Whatever. They gave Narcan to little Zoe. Yeah. They administered it, and they saved Zoe.
Yeah, they did. They saved Zoe.
Well, see, I don't want to see that happening to my local, dogs in my area. I'm going to go buy some Narcan at Walgreens tonight. Oh, really? In case, Zoe or Spike or whoever, poor dog is, there it is. And I go, the poor doggy ran into some fentanyl powder, started licking it. Now the doggy's dead. Let me try to resuscitate the little doggy. 617-266-6868. God help us. 603 here. Sorry. 617-266-6868. 603 here. With a very good text. Jeff, my wife works at a major Boston hospital. The addicts go into the public restrooms in the hospital, enter a stall, tie the emergency call string around their wrists, and then shoot up. That way, if they pass out and hit the floor, it sets off the alarm so medical personnel can rush in to save them. What a world. Well, now you can just go to your local Walgreens and everybody can get a nice nasal spray of Narcan. And so, you don't have to even call the nurse anymore. Now you just see the guy just come in, a little up the nose, and there you go. Shoot up again, baby. Sean in Concord. Go ahead, Sean.
Hello. Hi, Jeff.
Hi.
I've called you before. I think we met once, a couple of times. Anyway, I was wondering, corporate big business makes strange bedfellows. It always has throughout history. I wonder if the big drug companies are maybe somewhere in collusion with the drug cartels.
Sean, I can't say that because I have no evidence. What I can tell you for sure is that they're an incredibly powerful lobby up on Capitol Hill. They have tremendous amount of influence, and they spend a lot of money. And they do not want to be held accountable at all because it's now one of the biggest industries in America. So I want you to think about it. Now, by selling Narcan in Walgreens, we're actually enabling drug addicts to continue to shoot up. The problem is not going to get better. It's just going to get worse. Now, on that very happy note, that very cheerful note, everybody have a wonderful weekend. Brittany, you're going to say something there? No? Okay.
No, just hurry up and wrap up.
Get the Narcan spray, the nasal spray for Rudy. Get one for your dog, for God's sakes. You never know.
The voice of Boston is you. 680 WRKO Boston, 93.7 WEEI HD2 Lawrence, Boston. It's 3 o'clock.